Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to be able to speak to you today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Good to talk to you, Sarah.
I believe you're in New York, is that right?
That's right.
Is it a big time difference? I can't remember. It's about 3 o'clock here, but
Yeah, we're five hours apart.
5 hours apart. Oh, not too bad. It's not the crack of dawn or anything.
Yeah. No, definitely not.
So maybe you could just kick off with a brief introduction to, I guess we could call it a mini season of your incredible films that's going to be kicking off here in the UK. I believe, is it the first time they're going to be showing in cinemas here? Is that right?
They've shown in some festivals. So, for
Yeah.
example, Glasgow is the film theater there is showing them, and they've shown all of them in the past. But it's nice to have them all together. And I don't think any of them have. One has played in London at a small theater before, but yeah, most of them are pretty unknown throughout most of the UK.
Yeah, amazing. So maybe you could just very, very briefly, because it's a lot to get through, but what are the four films and kind of, how have they shown maybe a bit of an evolution in your style? And obviously two are kind of part of the same story, a two-part film, a pair that come together, if you like.
Yeah, I guess they run almost 7, 8 years between the first one and the last one, and they, for me, it's sort of, I'm interested in a film if I have something unanswered about it, something kind of new to me. So they're very different films. And even though the first two sound similar, they're sort of family dramas, and they kind of taught me how a home can be a very interesting place to photograph. It seems like you're repeating a place, it seems kind of confined, but you look for new possibilities of seeing it. And so those taught me a lot about the house. And then with the last two films, which are this duology, we break out of the house, we leave home, and we kind of look at a community, a small town. And that was a lot of fun because it's kind of like, almost like you're leaving home as a teenager or something. You discover there's a very wide world. It kind of stylistically breaks open, and it's much more comedy. There's elements of musical and dance in there. And so that was a very fun and very different project for me.
And focusing kind of, on the more recent, the kind of the paired films, The Bread Factory, where did the original idea for that come from? Kind of this concept, because it's very unique, and especially like you say, in the way it's shot and the kind of comic tone to it, breaking out into song. So there's lots of different things going on there. So what were the inspirations for it?
Well, with the first two movies, I toured a lot with them, not just the festivals, but when they opened, they would have very slow rollouts in countries, and so I could travel with them, and kind of traveling, meeting a city through its theater, and kind of learning about the town, but also the people that come into a theater, and about the amazing people that run these theaters. Was very inspiring. So we actually went back to one of these theaters that had invited me to talk, and that I had visited. That was this kind of community space that had a lot of art going on, and a lot of challenges that I think were common to a lot of these places. But a lot of warmth. It just felt really good to be there. Even though we weren't solving any problems in the world, it was just a wonderful refuge and a wonderful place to think about our lives. And so, yeah, I took inspiration from those places, and I'm like, it would just be nice to remember them, pay tribute to them, but also to be there thinking about these harder questions about art and commerce, and where are we going with all of this?
And what can you tell us about your filmmaking style? Because I guess it's sort of observational in a way. Like sometimes we feel like it's almost, you're sat it's like a documentary. We kind of just sat watching people chat away, watching rehearsals or so on and so forth. So there's kind of like an interesting, relationship between the audience and the characters and stories we're watching.
Yeah, I would say, I hope it's open-minded, sort of the same way I am about the characters and what's going on. I go in and I don't know what it's going to look like yet. I don't know where I'm going to watch this from. I don't know what the style is going to be. And I think what will happen is I just use whatever works. And so sometimes what works is what you're used to in a soap opera, and sometimes what works is something you see in an art film. And sometimes what works is something I've never seen before. I'm sure it exists in some form, but it's new to me. And so I kind of like this discovering moment to moment what works. And then, you want to make sure it all fits together in a way that's not too jarring, and that people can move with it. But I kind of like, I mean, a style emerges because, there's certain, you're in the same place a lot of times, you're a certain distance from people. Certain things start to want to kind of cohere, but I feel like I try not to set that out at the beginning and saying like, this is going to be this is going to be this. I like to let it reveal itself.
Mm. And can you tell us a bit about your casting process? How did you decide who's going to be in your film? And how did you work with them kind of to develop, these really strong characters, and they've got to feel like they have like a depth of psychology about each of them?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked about that because that's one of my favorite parts is casting. And, from a first film, I think I only knew of the work of one actor before going into it. No, two, that's two actors, but it was, the processes are very open. I work with the casting director, Cindy Rusher in New York. And what I love about her is that she is very happy to bring in people who don't have a resume that kind of just screams at you, that is advertising itself. She just loves good actors. If they're new, they have different backgrounds. And in the casting room, I love working with them. Same kind of thing I described about finding something. I'm not looking for a finished performance. I just like people who are interesting and I can work with in some way. And I can imagine more where we'll be than where they are in the moment in the casting room. Mm-hmm. And the scripts I write are very, the dialogue is set, everything is kind of set. We shoot what we have, but there's a lot of room even within that for an actor to do a lot of work, in that there's a lot between the lines, but also you can imagine, you have a line, you can read it hundreds of different ways. And I love when an actor surprises me. But something I thought was the central, important thing, they'll throw away. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't always work, but when it does, it's great. It's just kind of, it's almost like a line improv. Mm-hmm. It has that sort of, gives that same life to a scene without having to change any of the words.
Mm. And can you tell us a bit about the form of the Bread Factory and the fact that it is this kind of two-parter? Because I guess we normally have like series, which everyone's getting used to, like binge watching a lot these days, or you kind of standalone film. So why did you feel, for example, that you needed more space than just the one film, and why make it into two parts?
Yeah, I didn't know it was going to be two parts until I started writing it, and kind of very naturally split into these two things. And I think there's sort of two ways of looking at the challenges we have in the world. One is, the part one is kind of an old-fashioned kind of, we rally the troops and we have this showdown and we fight the fight kind of movie. And then the second one, I think, is a little more like the struggles we have today, where it's kind of like the fight isn't as defined. Things slip away when we're not looking, when we're distracted. And I think it's a little more modern, and it continues the same story, but I think it has two very different views about what the struggle is, and what we can do about it.
Mm-hmm. And what do you hope people will take away from watching them? I guess there's so many things in there, like you're saying about communities, the effect of commerce, even as you're saying, just like going to these spaces, do they have to have a commercial value to have value to our society? There's so much else that people can gain from being around other people and doing something creative. But also, even though there can be challenges, is there always hope? Especially, do you gain something by overcoming challenges? What do you think some of the themes are?
Yeah, I think a lot is there for interpretation, but my favorite reactions from people, and I heard a little of this in your question, is that either you're remembering a place like this, I think a lot of communities have this, a lot of people had this in their lives, and maybe they, like a lot of things in our life, they come in and out. And so maybe you've forgotten about it, or I guess one thing I've liked is a lot of people have either remembered these places or remember not to take them for granted. And so they'll go back to them and they'll remember what a beautiful thing this was in their life. The other thing is almost a kind of parallel to that, is just remembering the thing I like about this space in a bread factory is it's not this sort of grand thing about art. It's not about art as career. It's not about art as commerce. It's just art has a place in your life. And not just as a consumer, you as a person can engage with it, without having to make a masterpiece. It helps you. It helps you understand your life. It helps you as a human being, and it's fun. And I think we sometimes forget that. And I like hearing from people that they're just reminded of that. And so that they'll pick up something maybe they dropped a little while back with, they weren't getting all these other kinds of signals from the world that it was important and valuable, but they remember that, oh yeah, it was great for me. I enjoyed it. And then it's a piece of my life that it'll make my life a little richer, just kind of going back to it. I like that.
Which, of course, even though this film was made originally released back in 2018, feels even more relevant now if you think of the couple of years we've had, and the cultural industries, some that have been the hardest hit by the pandemic, but actually have almost been a lifeline for a lot of people, whether it's music, whether it's theatre, whether it's film. These are the things that help us feel connected and have helped us get through it. So let's really hope that it's not something that we do lose. So do you feel positivity, and do you think there's kind of, it hits home in a different way maybe now than when it was first released?
It definitely hits differently. I think that community space, which I was already kind of missing before the pandemic, I think everybody misses much more now. That's for certain. And yeah, it's I think it is nice to be able to revisit the film like this and see different things in it, and be reminded of different things, and yeah, I don't spend too much time kind of going back and thinking about these things, but this is one that I would really like to watch with the group again. I would like to hear that laughter together again.
And thinking about your own trajectory as a filmmaker, what does it mean to you for your films to be kind of reaching broader audiences, kind of here over the pond, in other places in Europe? And what have you got planned next in terms of films or other projects?
Yeah, it is always a privilege to get to kind of learn people, it was wonderful to just go anywhere and kind of meet people all around the world in any circumstance. But with a film, it's great because you have something to talk about. And so it's a nice focus to kind of jumpstart conversations. And so I always love that. And I hope people, if people see it and they want to talk, that they'll get in touch with me. I just kind of love hearing all different perspectives from around the world. For me, the projects I've done a lot of, as a lot of writers have, I've done a lot of writing the last few years, and kind of discovered a few new things. I discovered a love for translating poetry. That was a pandemic project. And then recently, photography. Sort of in the 30s and 40s, we had this really beautiful wave of documentary photography, particularly of rural communities here in the US. And I've just loved, for the first time, I'm jumping into photo archives and doing, research at the Library of Congress and National Archive, and being reminded how wonderful librarians are, and a kind of a different world. So it's kind of, you adjust to the new interests, and also just kind of the new constraints you have in your life.
Yeah. And, obviously we're kind of like in award season, how do you see the health of the cinema industry? Are there other filmmakers that you really respect they're out there at the moment, or any that you think are underlooked, underappreciated, under the radar?
Yeah, I mean, that's the history of the world, right? There's always people, and I think that's one of the reasons I love these particular poets and photographers I was talking about. It's kind of like they did so much with their lives, and they are generally not known for poets, because you need to generally be translated into English for an English speaking audience to talk about you. And then, yeah, photography, I'm not quite sure why certain people make it and don't. But in film, to answer your question, there's one I can think of that I really love, the film I love from the last year, that it's gotten some attention, but I had wished it got a lot more. It's called Great Freedom. from Austria. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but I think it's
Oh,
just beautifully done. You know, all the elements of it are there, and then if you love great acting, the actors in it are just wonderful to watch.
oh, I have to look out for that. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I can't wait for, more British audiences to, dive in and experience this mini season of yours that's coming here. So it's great.
That will be wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah. It's great talking
Thanks a
to you.
lot, Patrick. Lovely to speak to you. Thanks. Enjoy your day. Bye. Bye.
Bye.